I remember waking up in the middle of the night so many times, just having that feeling of terror and just crying and crying. Just couldn't, I needed to find someone else to relate to. And as much as I had the most wonderful support group around me of family and friends, I still felt completely and utterly alone because no one could understand exactly what I was experiencing. Within months, we had over 500 members. And I cannot explain to you the instant relief that I felt speaking to these people. It was the 12th of February, 2014. And I remember everything about that moment, you know. Everything around it was sort of a bit vague. That moment, I got a phone call. My husband was sitting there on the bed. I walked into the bathroom and I had the phone to my ear and he said to me, okay, so we've got the results and it's definitely a lymphatic disorder. Now, I don't know what made me think. I said back to him, is that cancer? But I don't know what made me say that because to me at the time, lymphatic disorder, well, it's some kind of disorder and, you know, we can sort it out and I'll be okay. But the words just tumbled out of my mouth, is this cancer? And then he said, yes. Oh, it was like a punch in the face. That's honestly how it felt. And I just stopped breathing. After I had the results back from the bone marrow, they did find some juvenile cells in there, which determined that I was stage 4. And I then we then had the conversation, you know, these are the treatment options, but the one that they recommended the most was a clinical trial that they were just coming to the end of. They'd been running for about 10 years and it was just coming towards the end. It was called Hot Mabthera. So basically it was the monoclonal antibody rituximab coupled with radioactive iodine 131. So the idea was that I would have quarterly infusions of rituximab for a year. And then not long after my first infusion, I would be injected with the radioactive iodine and go under house arrest for 10 days.
Yeah, so you made that decision. And then how long was this for? It was a year period? So it was 4 times?
So the radioactive iodine infusion was just once. And that was very quick. It was a machine that had to give me the infusion because a human couldn't do it because it was I was so close to it. And something that still sort of weighs on my mind now when they were injecting me, the physician said to me, I can't remember exactly how he put it, but it was like, by the way, this could cause another, like a secondary cancer, but probably not for like another 20 years. And I'll never forget that he said that. And I thought, well, you didn't tell me that before. I'm sure it was in the paperwork, but there were mountains and mountains of paperwork that I had to sign for this trial. So that does weigh on me as well. So not only the idea of it, because it is an incurable cancer, that coming back, but also secondary. So I do try very hard to look after myself. And
I couldn't help but shake my head. I mean, if you're not going to mention it before, like make it a point to, and you're just about to, what was the point of saying it? Was it to give you one last ditch sort of like opening of, hey, if you want out, this is your opportunity? Like it's a little frustrating to think about the sequence of events, like the order of it. So this was a clinical trial. Did your doctor explain several different options and then say, hey, I think this is the best one? Or what was that conversation like?
So they said usually they would give patients with this type of cancer R-CHOP, and that was probably, and this was almost 10 years ago. So at that time, there wasn't as many different types of treatment as there are now. Although he did say to me at the time, "Oh, there's new treatments emerging, so you may not need to have chemo." Well, I think the idea was I didn't want to really have chemo if I could avoid it. So that's why I was happy to go along with that option. They did say at the time that a lot of people with this will go and watch and wait. And I remember thinking at the time, because they said to me they wanted me to start treatment probably, they said within a month at the time when we had the appointment. And I was breastfeeding my son at the time, and I really wanted to breastfeed him as long as I could. I really enjoyed breastfeeding. It was just such a beautiful experience for me and my baby. And that was probably one of the hardest things for me to do, was to give that up. But another thing they said to me at the time was, because you do ask, "Oh, what's the prognosis for this type of cancer?" And he said to me, 10 years with treatment. And I remember thinking at the time, well, that's better than 6 months, Immediately I was kind of grateful for 10 years. And then I got home and I thought about it, and I was like, hang on, counting how old my kids are going to be at that age. And I thought, 10 years, no, I can't do 10 years. I need to meet my grandkids. I need to grow up with my kids. So that was one thing that stuck with me as well, was that prognosis.
And Nicky, you talk about, and I've heard this from many people actually, it's like the first thing you think about when you get a diagnosis is less really from your own point of view, but from the framework, if you're a parent, especially a young parent, of, wait a minute, yeah, what's the calculus here for how old they're going to be, and what could I potentially miss? Can you talk us through that moment and kind of what was going through your mind? What was that calculus in your head of?
Yeah, my son was 1 and my daughter was 4. And yeah, that was all I could think about, was my kids. And so it's, they're everything, especially at that age. I'm thinking, if I only have 10 years with my son, he's only going to be 11. And you really take on board what the doctors say, like, that they tell you that. I mean, I've learned now, no one can tell you how long you're going to live. No one can say that. They can give you statistics. And I think I realised now the statistics he was giving me was, I think I should explain this type of lymphoma. They call it the old man's disease, because they find a lot of older people will get this. It was quite rare for me to get it at that age. So those statistics are based on older people who have got this condition and how long they have lived. It's not whether they died of the lymphoma or not. It's how long they lived. And so I realised after a long time thinking about it, that I put it down to that he was giving me those stats, and they weren't accurate for someone like me. They were accurate for someone in their 80s diagnosed with this. That at the time, that probably took me a good 3 or 4 years to wrap my head around that, to let that go finally, because I held on to that for a long time, and was terrified. Like I remember waking up in the middle of the night so many times, just having that feeling of terror and just crying and crying. And thank God my husband was there, because he would hold me, and he remembers those moments. And, it's just a horrifying feeling.
I'm glad you had the support you did around you. And so that was for a year. Is that right?
That's right. Yes.
Okay. And at what points did you get scans, and how did you deal with the, as we call it, scanxiety?
Anxiety. Yeah. So I had one more scan in, I think it was September that year, just to see if the treatment was working. But we could tell it was working because the lumps on my neck were disappearing. So when I think it was my second infusion, so I had the first one in May, so it must have been August when I had that. And so I had they had the PET scan in the morning, went to have my treatment. By the time I finished my treatment, they came back and said, it's working. I think what they said, it was NED at the time. So there was no evidence of disease, but I was to finish my course of rituximab as a maintenance. But I did go through some hard times though, because it was a medical trial. I had to give weekly blood tests, give my blood, and I didn't get to see those results. So I didn't know. That was purely for the clinical trial. So I think I got to know the phlebotomist ladies quite well. They were really lovely, and I'd see them every week. And then I went back one week and I said, look at my arm. My arm was very bruised all the way down to my hands. It was like I was bleeding under my skin. And I said, look what you did to me last time. It really hurt. And she said, that's not normal. You shouldn't be doing that. So they were able to get my results up on the computer, and my platelets were very dangerously low. And because, two reasons. My hematologist at the time went on holidays for a couple of months. So I had no contact of a hematologist at the time. I remember calling his receptionist saying, I've got really low platelets. What do I do? And she didn't know she didn't even have anyone to refer me to. So the only person I could go to was the scientist or the doctor running the trial. And he's not a people doctor, he's a scientist. But he was really lovely. He was at a different hospital to what my hematologist was. And I went in there and I said, I need some help. I don't know what to do. I've got really low platelets. So I sat in the hospital for 2 days, and I wasn't admitted. I sat there, they took bloods. They came back and said, your platelets are low, but we'll check them again tomorrow. And if they're still low, we'll give you an infusion. And my dad sat with me for 2 days. It was really, really sweet of him to do that. And I did eventually need to get that infusion. And with the trial, I asked the doctor, because I did end up having to get another hematologist after that, because I just felt I didn't feel supported enough by that particular hematologist, because he went on holiday, didn't give anyone to look after me. And it was that doctor on the trial that said, go and find a good hematologist, a young hematologist, because this is something you're going to be living with for the rest of your life. So I said, okay, who are the best hematologists in Perth? And so I found out who the best one was. That was Dr. David Joski at the time. And I was lucky enough for him to take me on. And he was actually involved in the clinical trial. His name is on the paper. And he said to me, the platelet thing was not something that other patients experienced. So we still don't really know why I experienced that. But it was, I remember it being really, it was very scary at the time, because they had to get the local hematologist on call in case I had an accident and all. So going back to the scanxiety, I did have that one scan in August, which confirmed that the treatment was working, which was great. But I haven't had a scan since that day yet. I've been so lucky because, at the time, my doctor said, expect this to come back in about 3 to 5 years. That's the average time. That's what the stats say. This is when it's likely to come back. So I'm now, I think, 8 years now, and it hasn't come back. Well, it's there. I know it's there. I can feel those lumps, and that's how I monitor it. And I also look out for other symptoms or signs like the weight loss. I was so grateful that I didn't go and watch and wait at the time. I got to start treatment, and I was in warrior mode, and it's funny because my mental health during treatment was so much better than my mental health after treatment. But now that I know what I know, I wish I got to go and watch and wait, because there's the time. You've got the time. I know people call it watch and worry, and you do. It is watch and worry, but you've got the time to research the different treatments that are available to you. You can really, have those choices.
I really appreciate that, because that's so powerful coming from someone who had a different path, right? And first of all, at least on treatment, regardless of what treatment it is, people have a plan. There's something that you're doing. there's a course of action. And then with this cancer in particular, and I don't have to tell you, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it's this, you're hearing after you're done, okay, well, you're no evidence of D's. However, asterisk, this is probably going to come back within this period of time. So bring us back to that moment of trying to figure out how to live life with all of this information, with, you know, with all these things that are being put onto your plate, and also as a mother of young kids in the household.
Yeah, it was really hard. I say the hardest part of it, the whole thing now looking back, was when I finished treatment. Everyone celebrates when you finish treatment. Yes, this is great. We've done it. But the idea of it coming back, that's what you immediately start thinking about. And I remember them saying to me at the time, look, if this comes back in the first 2 years, your prognosis is worse. They said that to me, and I was thinking, oh God, okay, so 2 years, I can't get this back in 2 years. So far, I was very, very on edge for the first 2 years, and but those first 12 months after treatment were the worst part for me. My mental health deteriorated rapidly. The anxiety that I experienced was just, it was numbing. I was teary every single day. And as you know, and I was still in mum mode, you know, I was still trying to get my daughter to school. I was looking after my 2-year-old son, and I was also working at the same time. I didn't stop working throughout the whole time, but I just remember that time just being very negative and sad, and I did a lot of Googling. I wanted to save myself. I wanted to cure myself. I researched everything that you could think of on the internet. I went down so many rabbit holes, but I also got very, very confused because I didn't understand how the human body worked. So I would hear something that this supplement was going to help, but I didn't understand why. I remember going into a supermarket one day, and because you read about all the chemicals in the food and the preservatives and things like that. And I walked into the supermarket and I was like, right, I'm going to get all the foods that I can eat. And I came out of that supermarket in tears with an organic banana in my hand, thinking, this is the only thing I can eat. I could not find anything else that was suitable for me to eat. And that was a moment that I remember, because I just remember feeling absolutely devastated, and my weight dropped. I ended up being about 48 kilos and very skinny. And I was not a very nice skinny. I felt like I was going to break. I had no muscle at all. That I didn't feel like I had any muscle. So one thing that did help me through that time, though, because my doctor said to me, go and build some muscle back, because I'd lost so much muscle. And that did help me a little bit with my mental health. I didn't go to the gym, though, like he told me to, because that sounded rather boring to me. When I was a child, I did classical ballet, and I really, really loved that. So I found there was a pole dance studio opening up down the road from me, and I went in there and I said, I think I was going through treatment at the time, and I said, I need to start building some muscle back. And that ended up being a huge passion for me, because I got to dance, and I had a pole for stability, and the strength moves involved in pole dancing just allowed me to become really fit. But that was gradually over a few years of that time. I actually ended up becoming one of their instructors. But during that 12 months, that helped me a little bit mental health-wise, because I was reading into exercise and all that, which is really good. But I still struggled because I couldn't find anyone to relate with. I'd met other people with non-hodgkin's lymphoma through the Lymphoma Australia and Leukemia Society in the two charities that we've got for lymphoma in Australia, and they were fantastic. They put me in touch with other people, but we couldn't find anyone with follicular lymphoma. I don't know where they all were at the time, but I just needed that connection with somebody, because the main difference is with non-Hodgkin's, as you know, the most common is diffuse large B-cell, and I think that's the one that you had. Follicular lymphoma, it is the second most common, but the difference between the two is that the diffuse large B-cell is very aggressive, but it's also curable, whereas follicular lymphoma is not as aggressive, but isn't curable. I needed to find someone else to relate to, and it wasn't until almost 12 months after I finished treatment, my husband and I, we ended up going on a bit of a search for someone else with follicular lymphoma. So I, as much as I had the most wonderful support group around me of family and friends, I still felt completely and utterly alone, because no one could understand exactly what I was experiencing. So we went on Facebook and asked, are there other people with follicular lymphoma? I think we found a couple, but I didn't quite make those connections. So I thought, all right, well, there isn't a Facebook group dedicated to follicular lymphoma patients, so I'll just set one up. And I thought, okay, well, because we're living with this incurable cancer for the rest of our lives, I'm going to call it Living with Follicular Lymphoma. So it was November 2015 that I started the group on Facebook, and instantly people started coming in. Even a couple of people from Perth came in within the first few days of me being diagnosed. So that was the first time I was able to meet face-to-face people with FL, and I'm still very good friends with them to this day, and they've been amazing with support for me, and we support each other. And then people started coming in from all over the world, and I think within months we had over 500 members. And I cannot explain to you the instant relief that I felt speaking to these people. And I wish so much that I had that at the beginning of my journey. And I want everybody to have access to that. As soon as they're diagnosed, come to our community and see and speak to these people. The moment though that I realized that I needed this support though was when I was at a point where I was crying every single day. I didn't realize how much it was affecting my kids, and it was my daughter that really pulled me out to really finally go and get some help. She was doing something at school where they were writing letters to Santa, and she wrote in her letter to Santa, "Dear Santa, I've been really good helping my little brother with my mum, but my Christmas wish is that I want my mum to be happy every day." And that gets me still. It still gets me. I remember standing, pulling it out of her bag and just thinking, she's noticing this. This is affecting her. So I need to do something for this now. And that's when I went to my husband and I had a talk, and we were like, we need to find others with this condition. And that is what started me on that journey of connecting with other follicular lymphoma patients. And it was such a huge relief when I finally did. So it was that moment that I realised I have to do this for my kids, and not just for them, but for me. I want to be there for them. I want to witness these things that they're going to experience growing up, and be there for those times, those hard times, and I need to be strong enough to do that, to support them. So, yeah, I remember it just being a huge pivotal moment for me.
What would you want to write to yourself in that moment? Knowing what you know now, knowing and looking back at where you were mentally and emotionally, what would you want to tell Nicky at that time?
At that time, I would want to if I myself right here, right now, could go back and say something to myself back then, I would say to myself, this isn't the end. Things are going to get better, and you need to push to get there. So don't give up. Don't ever give up.
Oh, so powerful. Any last thing that you want to share with people out there who are watching and reading this? There are different points of their experience with different cancers, including follicular lymphoma. What do you want them to walk away from this understanding and knowing?
I would like them to know that this isn't the end. Don't ever consider this being the end of your journey. This is just a new beginning, a new life. And it's not always going to be doom and gloom. It can be really positive. And you can also give back as well when you're ready, you know, when you're strong enough, and also to find your people, find the people that are also dealing with this similar situation to you, because it's just so powerful, because not only are you supporting each other, you're also supporting the patient voice. You know, one of my biggest goals is to connect as many FL patients as I can. I want to connect all of them, everyone in the world, because together we're stronger, and together we can amplify that patient voice and, you know, bring about new treatments. And for us as FL patients, we want a cure.